Hi, how's it going? Hello everyone. When I review stick welders, I often remark on the cheap electrode holders. Maybe you're looking to upgrade yours, or maybe you made some new cables and you just want another electrode holder. Whatever the reason, I thought I would show and talk a bit about some of the different options to give you an idea of what you may want. Obviously, there are a ton of options beyond just what's shown here on the table, but I think these give a decent representation of the main styles. First, we have the spring clamp style. These are the most common and probably for good reason. They are simple, effective, and easy to use. They just hold the electrode in the jaws via spring pressure from this clamp. They hold the rod reasonably well, but if the rod sticks very hard and you try to break it free, you can end up pulling the electrode right out of the holder. On the other hand, if you want to drop the rod out of the holder, it's an extremely quick, one-handed operation to do so. If you're burning a lot of rods, it makes for quick rod changes, or if you're stopping and setting the electrode holder down a lot, it's really quick to drop the rod from the holder before setting it down. While welding, the lever may even give you some extra torque against the cable so that you can more easily point the rod where you want. Or it may just get in your way. To that end, you may want to look at the different variations. This style, with the taller sort of gooseneck levers, allow you to wrap your hand or your thumb pretty far up underneath the lever. But some of the larger ones can also make it more difficult to rest your thumb on the lever, and can also make it a little bit more difficult to drop a rod out without adjusting your grip. Assuming you're holding it like this and not like this. So the tall lever may be a benefit or a hindrance, depending on your preference. This Lemco holder is an example of what's probably a slightly more common lever style, which is more of a wedge shape. It's a little bit more convenient to just hold with your hand around the lever for quickly dropping the rod out, or for a bit more leverage against the cable. But conversely, if you did want to just hold the body of the holder, you can't get your hand as far up, and it's a little bit tighter to get like a gloved thumb or hand underneath the lever. This is a Jackson JH1, which has a really low profile lever, which makes it a bit easier to squeeze and more compact overall. Screw clamp style electrode holders obviously use a totally different mechanism for holding the rods. I have two examples here on the table, and in my opinion, these offer a couple of distinct advantages over the spring jaw style. They are almost completely shrouded except for a small hole for the rod, so it's very unlikely that you would ever get an accidental arc with one of these when setting it down on the bench or a project. And since they lack the lever acting like a hook, they will much more easily slip over a pile of welding cables or an extension cord without catching on it or catching on things in general. On the other hand, this Tweeko does have a slight hook built in, so not catching on things isn't a universal characteristic of the screw style, but generally they are slightly smaller to store, and there isn't a clamp to get in the way when holding them, and they're a little bit less likely to catch on things if you're dragging them across a floor or bench. This part is just a personal preference thing, but I feel like they allow a bit more freedom. Especially when working at odd angles and such. You can just hold them however you want, and there's no lever to get in the way. They also grip the rod more securely. Rather than relying on simple spring pressure, these actually screw down on the rod, clamping it in place. This allows you to easily bend the rod to whatever angle you want, and if the rod ever sticks, you have pretty much all the leverage you want to snap it free without fear of the rod coming loose. But the screw style are not without disadvantages. For starters, they're much more difficult to release the rod from one-handed. I don't have this one very tight, so I'm able to do it, but if you have this clamped down pretty tight and you have gloves on, it's a little bit more difficult to do one-handed as far as releasing a rod than it is with the clamp style. Granted, you will typically be using two hands when you put a rod into either holder, but when you go to drop a rod free, this one's pretty tight now, so couldn't do it one-handed. And again, could be even more difficult with a glove, Whereas the spring clamp style, as you go, you finish up, boom, your rod's out. It's a small difference, but if you're changing rods a lot or stopping and setting the rod holder down a lot, that little bit of speed difference and simplicity difference of dropping the rod from the holder can be noticeable on a project. Personally, I prefer the unrestricted grip of this Lenco screw clamp style. There's nothing to catch on cords, and you just really would have to try hard to get an accidental arc with this thing when you're setting it down on a bench full of bits and pieces of your project. But as I said, on bigger projects, I do notice the extra simplicity and convenience of being able to drop a rod free very quickly with a squeeze of the clamp with one hand. And I would say that this compact Jackson is nearly as sleek, and if I'm honest, probably more convenient more of the time, at least for more people, just because of the simplicity, and I don't have this one screwed together. Another consideration could be reliability. There's really nothing to go wrong with the spring clamp style. It's just a spring and a pivot point. I've never had a problem with the screw clamp style, but I've seen accounts of the threads getting messed up in here. I don't know if it's from over tightening or just from wear over time, or maybe from a little bit of soot or spatter, or maybe even some arcing going on inside there. As I said, I haven't had a problem, but it sounds like some have, so that might be something to keep in mind. In the end, they all work, and I can get by with any of them. But if you're going to spend the money to get an electrode holder, you might as well consider all the options and possible pros and cons. Obviously, I didn't cover every option, but hopefully you have a better idea of what's out there and what to expect from each style. If you have any questions, let me know. As always, thanks for watching. Take care.